Ciao a tutti, it's Aram, and today we are doing again the 1 hour probably long video on Constellars because I have learned a lot in the last year, and I have won a tournament, a big tournament finally with it. I've won smaller tournaments, but I finally feel like I actually won a tournament now. So yeah, and the list I won with wasn't really optimized, so I wanted to top with a better list first, and I just did that. So even if it's just a top 8, I want to talk about Constellars because I like doing so. I like to talk. You don't say. I'm a YouTuber. Anyways, we're gonna go in kind of a weird order. We're gonna go more by like roll of the cards rather than monster spells and traps. So first off, we have Chaos, which is our Constellar starter, quote unquote. It's a combo piece. You need an extender, but if you have two extenders, you're not doing that much. You want Chaos and another card. I used to think that maybe siding some tankies and cows out would be good in matchups where rank 5 access is not that important, but something I've learned is don't overside. Don't like the max, like the absolute max you should ever consider siding is 5 cards. So like you're gonna see a lot of that in the side deck, but I do want to preface that I will be going over, what to side in, what to side out, in what matchups roughly, what sort of matchups. But I am always keeping a trick house. I'm always keeping 3 tankies, except when I'm going second versus cat. In that situation, I might consider siding one out. Like for now, I'm doing that you go through the decision tree on it and decide whether you think that's beneficial or not, because tanky is a liability going second versus artifacts, because you can just give them free ignition setup or give them a make double cycle on live. So there's some issues with it, and tanky, seeing chaos and seeing tanky is not exactly interchangeable, even besides the MST interaction, because tanky, you can bounce it back so that you can get another chaos, and that's a positive if you get plays up. But the negative is that you become suddenly a lot more exit-onable, so you really have to watch out for that when playing versus certain decks if you open tanky turn 1. But yeah, for the extenders, we are playing 3 copies of Pollux, a 4th copy of Pollux, 3 copies of Algiady, and 3 copies of Instant Fusion. This is kind of the max you can run without going into shitty cards like Solar Windjammer, which only really work with these guys, and instant and don't work with these guys. Pretty much you want to see these with your cows, but at the same time, if you see these together, it's kind of fine depending on the matchup. Versus Mermels, seeing 2 of these is pretty much the same as seeing cows, because you just want to make Dweller. But besides that, the fact that Instant Fusion doesn't have a light level 4 does kind of sucks. You can't go into Tsukuyami, which is the best rank 4 to make turn 1. But yeah, generally, if your turn 1 is like you have one of these and Instant Fusion, you just pass unless you are going versus Mermels, and that. In that case, you make Dweller. Or, you can arguably make 101 versus Artifact Chartrix. Not entirely sure whether I would. Kind of depends on the rest of the hand. If I have Artifact plays and Instant can help with making Tiras, then, that kind of changes things. But yeah, those are the extenders. Instant Fusion, kind of a double-edged sword, because it doesn't work with these guys, but works well with the artifacts, which these guys suck with. So yeah. Then for the artifacts, we are playing 3 copies of Moral Attack, the 1 copy of Big Attack, and the most experimental slot this tournament. This is kind of the card that not entirely sure I would, you have to play this, follow me, play this card. But, I would at least side it. And, there's a couple of cards that I would advise you to swap out if you want to play it instead. But, um, looking at the matchup charts, the main thing with Scythe is Girgias. Versus Girgias, this is much better than Mortal. Not much better, but it's better than Mortal. But even besides that, versus like Mermals, it's good versus Soul Charge. Pretty much versus any deck where you fear their Soul Charge more than their actual engine, then Scythe is really fucking good in Constellars and not in Artifact Trap Tricks, in Constellars, because you can actually really take advantage of that with the extra deck. And usually if they Soul Charge and you Scythe, you can just kill them next turn with like Volcasaurus and Shark Fortress, because they just paid a bunch of life points, they have a bunch of monsters on the field, and you can just pop one with Volcasaurus, attack with Gaia, and that is a lot of damage. Maybe Shark Fortress too. So yeah, Scythe is really good for that. Besides that, in the Artifact Trap Tricks matchup, you would side it out, but game one it's not terrible because it's 2200, so it's kind of nice. Versus spellbooks and budgies, it's obviously that, but kind of the main thing is like there's cards in the side deck that have better matchup spreads. That I do keep in more times than Scythe overall, but Scythe is also searchable, so that obviously impacts things a lot. Overall this tournament did pretty well. I've used it game one twice, and I've only drawn it game one once, so it was pretty good. And even then, it wasn't in a situation where it was dead, I think. But yeah, kind of the most experimental card in the deck. But I feel like Scythe is pretty good overall. If you don't want to main it, just side it. It's fine. And then for other artifact cards, we are playing, of course, 3 copies of Sanctum. Kinda the best card in the deck, not gonna lie. Then for our back row hate, we are playing 3 copies of Ignition, 2 copies of Diebolt Cyclone, and 2 copies of Forbidden Lance. Lance is kind of weird. I was debating whether to even play this or not in the main deck, because like it's the one card in the deck that, besides Scythe, it's the one card in the deck that can just do nothing. But at the same time, this is a deck that needs its play to go through, and when you have Lance, you can just make that play with no issues, and that's really great. So like, I'm playing 2-2, but I'm setting the third copies. And you can definitely argue for playing the third copy of these in the main deck over Scythe, but I really wanted to try Scythe, and Scythe, it's searchable, so there's that. But yeah, and then the kind of more interesting part, in my opinion, kind of something that I've changed in my mind a lot in the last year about, is the recovery cards. We are playing not 1, not 2, but actually 3 Sombres now. Which, a year ago I was saying, play 1, then went to 2, but, I've kind of realized that in a lot of situations, having that really strong top deck is really important, because, like ideally this deck does want to win on turn 1. Turn 1, on turn 3 and 5, and before turn 7. But if you go under that, you are entirely relying on your top decks, and having strong top decks is really important. But in kind of depends on the matchup. In some matchups, you really either you're not expecting to go into late game, or you really need to avoid going into mid game. So in some matchups you just side 2 or even 3 out versus Girgias, but there's a lot of matchups where I side 2 copies of Sombre out, but there's definitely matchups where 3 is really nice, namely Artifact Trap Tricks and Mermels and Spellbooks. Then we have also in that same vein 3 copies of Soul Charge, which I was playing 2 before. because this looks kind of like a 2 soul charge kind of deck, but in theory I feel like 3 soul charge is pretty good. Again, it's another card that does get setted out, but not as much as Sombre. And then the kind of also new thing, 3 copies of Call of the Haunted. Again, I want more extensions and recovery, and it's really strong with Pleiades. But there's matchups where you side it out. But you try to avoid sending this card out because game 2 and 3 it becomes even better because it stops Crow, so that's really big. But yeah, if you've seen my winning deck list, I was playing 2 copies of XYZ Reborn. That card was bad. The main issue with XYZ Reborn is it's really hard for extra deck monsters to hit the graveyard because you either win early or lose early, and when you don't, a lot of the time your extra deck monsters end up banished or game 2 or 3 get just counter trapped on summon, so you can't summon them back. So the amount of times that XYZ Reborn is actually live is a lot smaller than I thought. When someone play this, it can get bottomless, it can get fated, it can get solemned, even Blackhorn. There's a lot of stuff that stops it. And when you're winning, it's dead. When you're really losing, it's dead. So it's kind of it's not a win more card. It's not a win lose less card. It's like a card, pretty much. And another big difference compared to my old lists is Upstart. I'm not playing it anymore. I feel like the deck is consistent enough that you don't really need Upstart, but you could consider playing it if you wanted to. But I feel like these cards are just strong enough in enough matchups where I just want to play more of these in the main deck. And if it's a matchup where they're not really strong, I'll just set them out. But yeah, that's the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, which not the most interesting part of my deck. There's only really one card that I've changed from last time, and we'll get to why when we get to the side deck. So starting off with the mandatory Marvelous and Dojama Knight. And we have the 2 Pleiades. Does 3 Pleiades ever come up? Yeah. Honestly, every once in a while you do miss the 3rd Pleiades, but there's just no room for it. M7, it's M7. Play it. Gaia, Volcasaurus, and Shark Fortress. These guys you want to kill with. If you don't know, if you haven't watched my last video, Shark Fortress lets you do an OTK. If you have a playlist with no mats, you just make M7 on top of it, make Shark Fortress effect on M7, attacks twice, you put Gaia on Shark Fortress, and that is 8,000 damage right there. So another reason why I'm not running Upstart anymore. It lets me kill earlier, which is important. Then 1 copy of Tiras for mainly Yacht, mid-game, really fucking strong. 1 copy of Durandal for, it comes up. And then we are playing, the 1 Tsukuyomi, the 1 101, the 1 Exiton, the 1 Dweller. And the last card in the extra deck is Constellar Omega, which I am gonna explain when we get to the side deck. Just keep that in mind. Now, for the side deck, which is really the most interesting part of the list, I feel like it's the part that I spent the most attention on, and there's something really cool at the end. But starting off with monsters, we have 3 copies of Flying Sea and 2 copies of Diddy Crow. Don't do this at home, kids. Don't just play 2 Diddy Crows in a deck randomly and without thinking about it first. The reason I'm playing 2 is, well, 1, I don't have room for the 3rd, but even if I did, it doesn't come up enough that I want to actually play 3. I will just get all of the side out of the way. So we have 1 Dimension of Fissure, 1 Double Cyclone, 1 Chalice, Yeah, that one, the third lance. 3 copies of Breakthrough Skill and 1 Solemn Warning. And, basically, Flying C is for Girgyas on one hand. You can kind of just bully Girgyas if you don't kill them immediately, which, it's kind of hard to do. So Flying C lets you bully them into submission pretty much. And besides that, versus Evil Swarms, it's great. Great versus Infernities. Can be good versus stuff like Hieratic Rulers. But yeah, Heraldic Beasts, which is kind of relevant right now. I've lost in top 8 versus Heraldic Beasts, which is kind of the funniest shit. It's the funniest way I could have lost. And now Heraldic Beast is in the finals. This is filmed before that match ends, so maybe should have waited, but felt like recording now. So hey, I've not recorded in 2 weeks. If I feel like it, I should probably take advantage of the moment. Then 2D Crow, mainly for Memels. Then it's fine versus stuff like it's good versus Bujins, good versus Artifact Traptrix. If it wasn't for Mammals, I will just play 1 Crow and 1 Cycle Reader, frankly. Mainly for going second versus that. Going first, I don't even side it because I don't want to side too much. Then Dimensional Fissure for Mermals and Rulers. Crow obviously good versus the combo decks and Rulers. The third Double Cyclone comes up versus back row decks, and especially when going second. Forbidden Last when going second versus back row heavy decks. And then 3 copies of Breakthrough Skill for Artifact Traptrix. This is the best card versus that. Crow is good, but Breakthrough is just amazing. It's kind of different between At and Constellars, because in At, Crow is by far the better card, and also Cycle Reader. Breakthrough is just the backup plan. In Constellars, Breakthrough is just so good. Love it. Play 3 just for the Artifact Traptrix. Literally doesn't. It's almost the only thing I said it in, but it's the best deck of the format, so it's pretty important. And then the Word Warning, which versus a lot of decks, it's very good going first. Versus some decks, it's also good going second. Decks where you fear the Soul Charge, decks where you fear their turn 3 normal summon, so like Girgias and Spellbooks. The main reason I'm not maining it is because it's kind of bad versus Artifact Traptrix, and I don't want to break on this card, and there's more important cards in the main deck, but if you want to side out Scythe, just play Double Cyclone, Lance, or Dimensional Fissure in the main deck instead. And you may have noticed that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 cards. I'm siding extra deck cards. Yes! So cool. This didn't come up. But in practice, it never came up. These guys never come up in the tournament. But the theory is so cool. I am pretty convinced that this is the future. The reason I'm playing Omega is like I want these cards for different matchups. And this deck you cannot overside, so you really don't need that many cards in the side deck. However, there's a lot of situations where just having that one extra deck monsters really solves the situation. So the reason I'm main decking Constellar Omega is because it's the most likely one to come out after turn 1, in game 1. It's pretty good versus Girgias and Spellbooks, some other decks. So, it does come up game 1 more often than these guys. Crimson number 12 is for turn 1 versus that. You just summon it in attack position mainly, and it's really good. They can't get rid of it very easily, so kind of better than Tiras turn 1 exclusively. Rhapsody, great versus Bujins and Rulers, those kinds of decks. And Demon Direwolf is for decks that can side Light Imprisoning Mirror, so Mermals and such. Also good for Gravekeepers, pop their Necro Valley. And it's also good versus Cyber Dragons, pop their Cyber Network pop their Cyber Network, and it's pretty good. So in almost any situation, I am setting out Omega. If I am setting those in, there's a couple of matchups where mainly Gravekeepers. I want both Crimson Armor and Diamond Airwolf going second, so I want to cut Tsukuyomi. So if you need to side 2 copies when going second, Tsukuyomi is a good choice. But for the monsters part, just side out Omega. So yeah, going into what to side in, side out. Versus, I'm gonna go over the main matchups, but versus Hat, going first, both Cat and Hat have the same siding patterns. I'm obviously gonna side out Scythe, and I'm also gonna side out 2 copies of Forbidden Lance, and I want to side in the 3 breakthrough skills. This is going first versus Artifact Charprix. Going second, I'm not entirely sure if this is the kind of correct thing to do, but I am setting in also the 2 DD Crows as well as the 3 breakthrough skills, and I am setting out the 1 tanky because, as I've said, it can be pretty detrimental going second versus Artifact Charprix. If you save it for late turn, after turn 1, after turn 2, it's fine, but turn 2 it's really bad, and then we have instant fusion because I mostly I do want to play it more slowly this matchup. So the other extenders I can just normal summon and they are beaters. Instant fusion I can't do that with. So yeah, it's a bit worse in that matchup. Even if we are going second, I don't really want to play fast versus Artifact Traprix, so there's that's why. Going versus Gilgas, we are gonna be siding out, well, if you are going first, Sombre is like, I'm not entirely sure whether siding out all 3 is correct, but I am siding out 3 because, it's really not that strong versus that matchup. I'm also siding out 1 Moral Touch and 1 copy of Soul Charge because you theoretically you want to end the games quickly. At the same time, a lot of the time you're kind of relying on Flying C because you can't actually do that very well. So yeah. But I'm setting in 3 Flying C and the 3rd Cyclone and the 3rd Lance, and going first. And keep in mind that versus Artifact Traprix, I am sending out the Omega for the number 12. Versus Gilgas, I keep the Omega. Meanwhile, when going second, I have my computer in front of me. I am keeping the surcharge because it lets me extend past back row, so that's pretty good. And I am not setting all 3 flank Cs because it can be dead more likely. You really want to combo it with Pleiades. Without Pleiades, it's not that strong versus Gilgas. And I am sending in warning to stop turn 3 summons. It's pretty good. And instead I am setting out 1 Call of the Haunted because I really want to end games quickly in this matchup. Versus Mermels, I am setting out the lances. Yeah, maybe I should just stop around. Yeah, I'll pause around. Versus Mermel, going first, double Cyclone is not that strong because you don't know how many backrows they're gonna set, and probably not a lot. But it does feel bad to cut it out because obviously they're likely gonna set in Light Imprisoning Mirror, but that's kind of what Diamond Diary is for. We're setting Lance because it's not very good, especially going first. Call of the Haunted, it's kind of another one that kind of feels bad to set out, but what am I gonna set out really? Besides that, I want the Sombres, I want just as level 4 bodies. One soul charge to push against their soul charge, so Call of Duty is kind of the next best thing, especially since I don't know if they're gonna side out like 3 crows and 2 Latin imprisonings. Maybe not. But they're probably not gonna side in the bank, so that's pretty good. And we're setting out Omega, and we're setting in the 2 crows, the Fisher, Solemn Warning, and Damandar Wolf. Pretty self-explanatory. Meanwhile, when I am going second, the only real difference is that I'm setting out Sombre because, making Dweller turn 2 is not as important. It's great, but, it's not mandatory when you're going second. And I definitely want to keep in the second double cyclone for, their Abyss Spheres, and more importantly, their Light Imprisoning Mirrors. It's a good card going second double cyclone, so yeah. Versus Spellbooks, you're not really setting a lot. Just set out one lance and one scythe for the third double cyclone and the warning. Meanwhile, when you're going second, lance is a lot better, so I'm cutting just a soul charge because it's more likely that stuff gets banished, and wanted double cyclone and warning. Versus Bujins going first, there's Sombre, which the Bujin matchup is really interesting, and I really like it actually, to be honest, which is kind of weird because I generally don't like to play against Bujins, but Constellars versus Bujins is really fun because it's pretty much caveman modern Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of games are just decided by turn 3, so I feel like that's kind of fun. But sometimes you go into grand game and it's a war to keep control of the field, the graveyard, what cards are in the opponent's graveyard and such. So Crow is kind of like a contingency plan. You don't necessarily need to set it in going first. If I see game 1 that the opponent is playing more back rows than I'm expecting, then I might just not set out Lance and keep Crow in. But the Fisher and Solemn Warning are really fucking good, especially going first. And Seth obviously is pretty fucking dead. Meanwhile, going second, the second Sombre, I'm definitely gonna set that one out and keep the lances in. And don't really need the Fisher because once they get their turn 1 set up, it's kind of hard. The Fisher is not that strong going second versus Bujins, so I'm keeping the crows and the warning in, but Sombre, it's like you really need to kill them quickly, and Sombre does not do that. You can do that with Soul Charge, you can do that with Soul Charge you can use on turn 2. Call of the Haunted you can use on turn 3. Sombre, you need to wait until turn 4 for it to do more than just being a level 4 body. So that's why I don't really want it that much versus Bujins going second. Versus Gravekeepers, you just want to set out all of the cards that, as many as the cards that are dead versus it and as possible. So 3 Sombres and 2 Soul Charge. Soul Charge obviously is a bit better when you can get rid of the Necro Valley. Call of the Haunted, you can just chain it to Necro Valley, so it's better. But I am setting out Omega, but in terms of setting in, number 12 or Diamond Wolf is kind of player preference. I feel like number 12 is better going first and Diamond is better going second, so that's what I'm signing. And besides that, the cards in the side that are kind of live versus Gravekeepers are Cyclone Warning and the 3 Breakthrough Skills, even if I can't really use the Graveyard effect, still better than nothing, which is these cards a lot of the time. You could argue for setting out Scythe instead of the second Soul Charge because you can make Soul Charge live relatively often. I just don't want it when it's dead, so just one is fine in my opinion. But yeah, that's it from me. Leave a like, join the Discord, subscribe, leave a comment, ring the bell. This video came out a lot shorter than I was expecting. I have made more side patterns for the tournament, but don't really need to go into detail into everything. But versus combo decks, just generally rule of thumb: side out Sombres and Lances, obviously. Just one Sombre in the main deck left is fine. Versus those kinds of decks, especially versus like Infernity going second, you just really need to put pressure on them turn 1 and 2. Also Hieratics. Meanwhile, like versus something interesting I've started doing is versus Evil Swarm when going second, I just side out Sanctum. Because a lot of the times it's just dead, so I don't want it. I'd rather have Ignitions and double cyclones and such, but yeah, and versus a lot of combo decks, going second, you definitely want to set out the Scythe, because it's kind of dead after that, and they probably already set up everything they need to. But yeah, that's it from me. Leave a like, join the Discord, subscribe, ring a bell, good shit, and goodbye.